our top story this morning, and the Prime Minister will call for robust pragmatism as he lays out his foreign policy agenda in a speech at the Lord Mayor's banquet in London later today.
Well, citing the threats of Russia and China, he'll say the UK needs to plan for the long term and stress the importance of a strong domestic economy at home to tackle competitors abroad.
Well, it comes amid an unprecedented wave of protests in China against the country's COVID policies. Demonstrators in Beijing last night called for the resignation of Premier Xi Jinping.
Well, let's talk to Deputy Digital Political Editor of The Express, Dan Falvey, who's here in the studio. Dan, good morning to you. What does the PM mean by robust pragmatism?
Well, quite interestingly, he's going to talk about the fact that we need to drop the rhetoric and come up with a long-term strategy. But he hasn't actually spoken about what that long-term strategy actually is. So he said robust pragmatism, but we don't actually really know the details of what that actually means.
That just sounds like rhetoric, doesn't
Absolutely. So, I mean, we may get some more details flashed out later on today, but it sounds like this is Rishi Sunak at the starting point of his foreign policy agenda. He's just setting out the broad principles of what he wants to do. And I think we're going to get details, in the weeks and months to come.
What do you think Rishi Sunak is doing? How do you think he's performing on the world stage at the moment? We've seen him at G20 and COP27 in recent weeks. This is kind of the latest step in what we've seen in those past few weeks.
Yeah, I think Rishi Sunak has looked to try to build relations abroad where he feels that maybe some of his predecessors maybe tarnished those relationships. So we saw him being very friendly, very chummy even with Emmanuel Macron. We saw similar with Justin Trudeau. We seemed to get on rather well with President Joe Biden of the US. Interestingly, at the G20, he was planning to have a meeting with China's Xi Jinping, which would have been the first one in half a decade. It got cancelled at the last minute following the incidents with Ukraine, which kind of caused everything to be thrown up into the air a bit. But he's looking to really reach out and build new relationships in a way that his predecessors maybe didn't.
Which is interesting when you mention Xi Jinping, because obviously the problems going on in China at the moment over their zero COVID policy, which there's some protesters are claiming has led to the deaths of 10 people in a house fire and what have you. There's a lot of upset, a lot of unrest, and we are, in fact, seeing protests here in the UK at the Chinese embassy over all of this as well. I mean, this clearly is something he's going to have to, through this, try to address.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's not just about these protests. There are other concerns as well. Conservative backbenchers are very concerned about the security threat that China potentially poses. And we're seeing steps being taken to, for example, CCTV cameras made in China being removed from government buildings. So there's a lot of unrest on Conservative backbenchers about just how far Rishi Sunak's going to go with this. And on the one hand, he's saying that we need to be careful because adversaries like Russia and China need to be taken seriously. At the other hand, he's looking to build those relationships, and they seem at odds with each other at the moment. And that's where we're still yet to get that detail from Rishi Sunak about what this robust pragmatism actually means.